What's up everyone, welcome back to Just Finished Coding. This is part 5 of our night tour simulation on Scratch 3, so let's get coding.
Just finished coding.
Now quick interjection here, if you've not watched parts 1 to 4, please watch them before you come here because we're picking up from where we left off and you'll be very lost. I'll leave a card for you right here. Please watch the videos and then come right back. If you're still here, I'm going to assume that you've watched parts 1 to 4, in which case this is the last part of this series and we'll be finishing up with everything in this video. So before I get into my imprint, what I want to do is to make this backdrop a little more colorful, and I'm going to make a light blue background. So this is really up to you. You can choose the colors that you want. I'm going to go ahead with a light cyan blue and set my outline to transparent. Now I'm just going to drop a rectangle throughout the stage and this should pretty much solve our problem. Perfect. Once you're done with that, now you can head over to the Imprint Sprite, and now this is where things get a little bit complicated, but just hold on with me right here. So head over to make a block from my blocks, and this block is going to be that very familiar go to X and Y block which we've been using, but in this case we're going to have an additional parameter. So first we have X position, second we have Y position, and I'm going to copy paste that for my second one. There we are. So second one is going to be Y position, or I'm actually going to call them chord. So X chord, Y chord, because these things are going to be like the input form. So that's going to be like 3, 5 or something like that, not literally the position of the sprite itself. So we're going to have a Y chord, and after that we're going to have something called number, and I'll explain what this is in a second, but just click OK. Okay, so now that you have this, you want to have your go-to block. And I know I've been going along with just put that in for the go to start X plus start Y and that whole mathematical thing that I'm going to do. But in this case, I'm going to explain it completely. So just hold on. So within the go to for the X coordinate, I'm going to have a plus, and then I'm going to follow that up with a multiplied by and then a minus. And now within the first coordinate, I'm going to have start X, not start Y, but start X. And or actually sorry, not start X but start Y. Then after that I'm going to have Y chord minus 1, because start X is what constitutes the Y positions, minus 1, and this whole thing times the square dimension. Okay, and on this side on the Y position, and I'm running out of space here, so I'm going to do that below and then drag and drop it there. On the Y coordinate I'm going to duplicate this entire thing, but I'm going to have a minus instead of a plus in the first tab. So I'm going to grab all of this, put this in the second one, and the start Y and put it in the first one. And I'm going to change the start Y to be start X. And I'm going to change this Y chord to be X chord, and square dim remains the same. So once you have this, now you can put this in here. And now let me explain what this whole code is all about. So start Y is really our starting position of the board, if you really take it that way, in our x-axis, not our y-axis but our x-axis. And the reason I did that is because the x coordinates, like I mentioned, are actually corresponding to the y position, and the y coordinates are corresponding to the x position. So if you really want it in literal terms, the distance, if you follow along with my mouse pointer, the distance between this edge of the stage right here and this is not literally the distance, because it's like a coordinate which was what, like negative I think it was 178 or something like that. What was start Y? Let me just check my initializer. So in the initializer we had start Y to be negative 180. So negative 180 is not literally this position right here, although you could view it that way if this coordinate was 0. It's really the distance from the center till here. So another way, if you want to view it, would be that this is the x coordinate from the center. So if this is your center, then this one is going to be start Y. So it's the x coordinate of the board right here, and start X is the exact opposite. It's the Y coordinate of the top of the board right here. So this top of the board, although we hard coded that in, is really going to be start X comma start Y. So that's the entire idea, and now that may make a lot of sense to you now if we see it. So we're going to start Y plus the y comma minus 1 times square dim, which is this square respectively. And after that, start x, we're going to do something similar. But since this position, from this position, if we move to the right, our x-axis is going to keep getting higher and higher, but our y-axis is going to become lower and lower and lower. So that's why we have the minus for y and plus for x. So now once you have that, now I'm going to make a bit of tweaking to the x and y positions. So now head over to motion, grab a change x by and a change y by. And within each of these, I'm going to grab in a division operator. So within the first one, what I'm going to do is to say square dim divided by 2.8. And I just hard coded that in after a bit of trial and error. So nothing really fancy there. What this is really going to do is, instead of making sure that the sprite goes to in between four squares, which is what this code will literally do, it's going to make sure like your sprite goes somewhere here, for example. And what this code is going to do is make sure your sprite goes here instead of remaining on that intersection of squares. So square dim divided by 2.8, and this one is going to be square dim divided by 2. And once you have that, that would be most of your go-to function. I'm going to have a couple of more blocks, but before that, I'm going to head over to the green flag and initialize a couple of things. So now head over to events and grab a when green flag is clicked. And in this case, I'm just going to hide my sprite, because what I'm going to do is to have a couple of clones, two to be precise, for each digit. So there's going to be one number for the ones place and one number for the tens place. And that is why I left some space right here, and that is what this number parameter has to do with. So now what I'm going to do is to have this message when we receive imprint, and I'll code in the go-to a little bit later. So when I receive imprint, and if you remember, imprint was the message we broadcasted in our night when we wanted the numbers to come and print themselves. So now when I receive imprint, what I'm going to do is to not directly just call in the go-to function, but do something before that. So what I'm going to do is to say if, okay, or rather an if else, don't actually do an if, okay, the else statement is going to be empty. So now if not score is 0. So if the score is 0, then we're not going to do this, because like I mentioned, the first square is not counted, and we do not want to like type in have a 1 printed out within our first square. So if not score is 0, then what we're going to do is to have a variable, and this variable is going to be called no, and make sure you set this for this sprite only. Okay, and now click OK, and it says variable called no already exists. Okay, never mind. So okay, and I'm not really sure where I used that, I think, but I'm just going to try deleting that, and yep, it had 0 uses. So okay, so I'm going to set it for this sprite only, and I'm going to call it no. And once you have that in place, now you can set no to be 1 at the beginning. And once you have that, you're going to have a repeat length of score inside. And length of score is going to return the number of numbers within the score. So if it's like 32, our output's going to be 2. If it's 10, our output's going to be 2. If it's 5, our output's going to be 1. So grab a repeat number of times, head over to operators, grab a length of, and instead of apple, put in the score variable. Perfect. Now after that, what I'm going to do is to change number by 1 or no by 1. And before I do that, I'm going to say create a clone of myself. And that's pretty much it. That's all we'll be doing when we receive imprint. And the rest of our code will be when we start as a clone. So now I'm going to head back and really think about what's going to happen if we have 2 clones in our case. Because let's just say the length of our score is 30, for example. Then we need 2 clones. But if you really view it right here in our define go-to function, what we really had was both of those numbers going to the exact same coordinate. So even if our score was 30, you'd have a 3 on top of a 0. And that's not something we really want. So now what we need to have is a simple if condition checker. So if the number, okay, and the parameter we're going to pass in for number is going to be this no variable. So if this number is 1, then we'll do something. And if the number is 2, we'll do something else. Okay. So what I'm going to do is to have an if then condition right here and say if, and I'm going to grab an and as well. So if number is equal to 1, okay, and a number, remember, it's the length of the score, okay, and score is greater than 9. So in this case, it means score is not 2 digits. So just like a double confirmation right there. So if score is greater than 9, and I'm heading over back to variables to grab the score. Well, in this case, what I'm going to do is this number is going to be the ones place, and the ones place is to the right of the tens place. So what I'm going to do is to change x by an additional something coordinate. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead with 15 because that works for me. And in case you're using the exact same sprites with the exact same sizes, they should work for you too. But you have to try and test this a little bit, okay? So now once you have that, now the next thing you want to do is to grab go backwards layers from looks. And the reason I'm doing this is because we don't want the score to show up right in front of the knight. We want it to go behind the knight. So go backward one layer, and that's pretty much it. That's all you need within your go to function. And now you can get into when I start as a clone. So when I start as a clone from the control category is going to be right here, and I'm going to put that in. And right after that, I'm going to have two if else nested within each other, okay? Within the first one, I'm going to be checking if the score is greater than 9. Now, if the score is greater than 9, then it means that, well, the score is 2 digits and the length of score is going to be, 2. Okay, so I'm going to check if score is greater than 9. In that case, I'm going to check once again if, or actually put this within your first, within your inner loop, okay? And outer loop, I'm going to check if number equals to 1. So each of these are going to correspond to, all this number, it's going to be either 1 or 2, okay? So if the number is 2, that's going to correspond to the tens place. And if the number is 1, it's going to correspond to the ones place. Okay, that's the general idea of this. And I'm going to check if the number is 1. Now, if the number is 2, we'll be doing something different altogether with regard to the clones. But just stay with me right here, okay? So if number equals to 1, well, in this case, what I'm going to do is to switch costume to, and remember, our score has, for example, I'm just going to take the example of 30. And here our score is going to have 2 letters. The first letter is going to be a 3 and the second letter is going to be a 0. So we'd want to switch costume to 0, but we can't be sure it's going to be 0 every time. So if the score is greater than 9, what I'm going to do is to just say switch costume to letter 2 of score. And this is always going to be the correct ones place. But if the score is less than 9, for example, there won't be a letter 2 of score. So this thing is going to crash. So what I'm going to do right here is if this is not the case, then I'm just going to switch costume to the score. Because if the score is 0, I have a costume for 0. If it's 1, I have a costume for 1. If it's 2, I have a costume for 2 and so on. I mean, 0 wasn't the best example because we won't show ourselves if the score is 0, but you get the idea. Now, the other thing that is possible is if number is 2, in which case it's the tens place. And this automatically implies that score has like a letter 1 inside of it. What I'm going to do is actually have an if-then condition still check up, although you really don't have to do this. But what I'm going to have is say if score is greater than 9, oops, not just score, if score is greater than 9, well, in this case, I'm just going to switch costume to letter 1 of score. And that's pretty much going to be it. Now, after this, we have to go to the particular coordinate. We just have the correct costumes at this point. And what I'm going to do is to say go to, and within our parameters, the first one is going to be x core, the second one is going to be y core, and the third one is going to be no. And after you have this, we're still hidden, so we'll show ourselves. So head over to looks, grab a show, and now we just don't want to show ourselves because Scratch has a limit on the clone numbers, and it's really just so annoying when the clones stop working. So what we can do instead is to use the pen extension, and I'm going to say stamp, and once we've stamped ourselves, we can delete the clone and the user isn't really going to notice anything. Now obviously the stamping is going to make our image look way blurrier and pixelated, but that really can't be helped. Scratch graphics aren't the best. So now when we hit the green flag, now I'm just going to choose that as a starting square. You can see that we have 1 in place, but it's clearly messed up in its coordinates, and that's true for all of our numbers. So we do have a bit of fixing up to do with regard to that. So yeah, so just scroll up right here, and the mistake I made was that this y was supposed to be -2 and I put in a +2. So you do have to be careful because the y value keeps on decreasing as you come in from the top to the bottom, and I'm used to some languages where it increases, so I made that error. Okay, so anyway, let's test it out now. I'm going to click that, and perfect. Now you can see we have the imprints coming on, and they are pretty perfect. I mean, I'm going to check it until it reaches 10, and now you can see it's obviously better if it's a bit to the left, but then that's going to mess up some of the perfectly placed coordinates. So I'm going to leave it right here. It's not really impairing our screen anyway. So this is going to be your night tour coordinates and also your entire night tour game. If you've enjoyed this series, then make sure you click on the video on your screen right here, and that will take you to a brand new game segment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next series.